The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Wednesday, November 27th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining us. I am away. I know I probably don't have to make note, but because I put so much effort into giving you a quality podcast, I just, I have to let you know that I'm just remote today. This is why the podcast sounds the way that it does. But it's still going to be a jam-packed show. I'll be interviewing Malaika Jabali of TheGuardian.com. She's previously written for Essence.com and The Intercept. I spoke with her last night, and we had a chance to discuss the article from Politico that covered President Obama's alleged comments about intervening to prevent Bernie Sanders from getting the nomination. Now, one thing that we did not go into great detail, we recorded the interview last night, and one thing that we didn't go into great detail was something that actually came out late last night, or actually early this morning. It's coming out that President Obama is directly saying that the New York Times, who originally reported this, mischaracterized his remarks, and that President Obama is saying that now is the time for bold ideas, and now is the time to move forward. So here's the thing. When you have political aides on your team that can't keep their mouth shut or need to feel important, this type of thing happens. And if this is the case, that President Obama says that his statement was misquoted and mischaracterized, then I think that he needs to come out and state that very directly. Now is the perfect time to state that. As far as that aide, this is like really inside baseball, but when you have people on your team that like to run their mouth, you need to get rid of those people. Now, I personally think that it is very possible that President Obama said this and that he is catching the backlash from this, and he's going to, straighten it out. Because I do believe that he has vested interest in the establishment. Of course he does. Right? Not that he needs the establishment, but the establishment needs him. He could write his check for the rest of his life and never have to do another thing. He's been the first black president of the United States, but the establishment desperately needs him. And so they're constantly going to pull on him to save them from Bernie Sanders. And it's not going to work this time around. So we'll discuss that in great detail in the interview with Malaika Jabali of TheGuardian.com. Okay, I want to go over something before I go to this interview that is happening and keeps the Democratic establishment always capitulating and acquiescing to Republicans. It can be summarized, and I'm thinking out loud here. I haven't had time to write this out, but I've been thinking about it some time, and so I just kind of want to think it out loud with you. It can be best summarized as projection. But it's like weaponized projection. It is absolutely making your base, Republicans making their base terrified of Democrats doing exactly what they are doing. It's not just projection. It is a weaponized projection coupled with the full knowledge of their base. Like, their base knows that this is the strategy. It's not that their base is being fooled and that we can expose the hypocrisy to them and win over the base. It is that their base, they are willing collaborators with this strategy of weaponized projection. And this is how every conservative is operating, especially if you're engaging online. This is what they do. They are going to try to hold you to a standard that you can never live up to, while simultaneously having zero standards for themselves. Case in point, there's a tweet from a former San Francisco Giants baseball player. I have his name here somewhere. I'll pull it up. But essentially yesterday, he tweeted out an example of violence that he was training his kids to do. Aubrey Huff, this is what he said. He said, I'm getting my boys trained up on how to use a gun in the unlikely event Bernie Sanders beats Donald Trump in 2020, in which case knowing how to effectively use a gun under socialism will be a must. By the way, most of the headshots were theirs. Now, here's the thing. Did he expressly say he wants to call for violence against Bernie Sanders? He did not literally say that. But here's what we will do. Especially in social media, you see the implications of it. Conservatives, under no circumstances, will ever admit that this is a problematic tweet that could lead to violence. In fact, they have done things that have led to literal violence, and yet they won't even acknowledge it as violence. Charlottesville, they murdered someone. And you know what their intention is? What they've done intentionally is to say that she died of a heart attack. So they have this, they're holding us to a standard that they have no intention of ever holding themselves to. And it's a standard that we cannot live up to, because just the very mention of anything, any type of retort, any type of response, any type of clapback, so much for the tolerant left. Any type of organizing, no matter what we do when we protest, it is always going to be seen as rioting. And here's how they bog us down. They bog us down because they get us on the defensive, and we try to explain to them, no, what we're doing is not actually rioting, it's protesting. Well, they won. They won because you expended energy trying to explain to them, and they know they have no intention of ever engaging in good faith. But what they've done is that they've changed the narrative. They've put you on the defensive. Meanwhile, they have radicalized their base so much so that their base, the Republican base, is ready for a civil war if Donald Trump loses. You think I'm being hyperbolic? Take a listen to this clip from True News.
They are deceivers. They plot, they lie, they do whatever they have to do to accomplish their political agenda. This impeach Trump movement is a Jew coup. And the American people better wake up to it really fast, because this thing is moving now towards a vote in the House and then a trial in the Senate. We could have a trial before Christmas. This country could be in civil war at Christmas time.
That's right.
Members of the U.S. military are going to have to take a stand, just like they did in the 1860s with the Civil War. They're going to have to decide, are you fighting for the North or the South? Members of the government are going to have to take a side. Instead of North, South, it's going to be left or right. People are going to be forced, possibly by this Christmas, to take a stand.
Now, notwithstanding the blatant and disgusting anti-Semitism of this clip, like it's drenched with a level of anti-Semitism that is shocking that he even has a platform. We can discuss that. But what he is doing there is literally projecting onto us what he's doing himself. The plotting, the scheming, the manipulations, and then the polarization, yes, but then also the fear mongering. And here's the thing, like this is a platform that is well known. Like this is this Rick Wiles guy. It's and it doesn't even matter that it's well known. This is what's happening right before our eyes. The extremist elements of the Republican Party has taken power. They are represented in the White House. This is a fringe, right? This is once would have been a fringe in the Republican Party, yet now it has come into the mainstream. And the way it has come into the mainstream of the Republican Party saves some of the open and blatant anti-Semitism. There's surely, we can see the anti-Semitism in the Republican Party, but the blatant anti-Semitism in that clip is still sort of under wraps, just a little. But what has happened is that the extremists of the Republican Party have moved into power, and they've moved into power by using, honestly, I think they read Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. And part of they've co-opted it for a right-wing fascistic movement. And part of that strategy is weaponized projection. to make everyone terrified that that the left is going to do or is doing, not even going to do. They have convinced their base that the left is doing exactly what they are doing. Weaponized projection. And so now the radical elements, here's a case in point. The most radical element of the left, according to conservatives, is Antifa, right? When they try to make you afraid of something on the right from the left, they point to Antifa. And they try to make you believe that Barack Obama and the establishment and Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, that they are all in league with Antifa, and they're trying to bring Antifa to take over America, and we need to be ready for a civil war because Antifa is running the Democratic Party. Now, just a matter of objective truth, that's laughable, because Antifa is barely embraced by people like me. Now, don't get me wrong, I embrace Antifa because I know and I understand the times, right? But if you had caught me 2 years ago, if you caught me 3 years ago before the inauguration, I was completely irritated with Antifa, but the times have changed significantly, in my opinion, in my estimation. So, whereas a person like me who's pretty far to the left, I'm just now getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, it's time for the black bloc. It's time for Antifa to keep doing their thing. They want you to believe that somebody like Barack Obama and the Democratic establishment is in league with Antifa, and you need to be afraid of Antifa, and we need to get our guns ready because Antifa has taken over the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, voices like his, Rick Wiles, are literally in the White House in the form, well, it used to be in the form of Steve Bannon, but also definitely still in the White House in the form of Stephen Miller. Donald Trump co-signs this. So what they have done, what they're doing is weaponized projection. They are making their audience terrified that you are currently doing exactly what they're doing, because the far right wing of the Republican Party has taken over the Republican Party. Donald Trump, the Republican establishment has no control. The Republican, if there ever was a Republican moderate, they have no control. Matter of fact, we see even like the fringe elements like Charlie Kirk and Turning Points USA, they are being pushed out by the most radical right-wing elements. But yet they have whipped their entire base into a frenzy where now it is acceptable for people on the right to be preparing for civil war against the left, while the left is generally, very specifically, the Democratic establishment is trying to maintain the establishment. They're trying to maintain institutions to the detriment of any values, to the detriment of any belief system, to the detriment of any policy. They want more than anything else to protect America's institutions and civility. And the right would have you believe that Chuck Schumer is getting ready to overthrow Donald Trump. Take a listen to this clip from Attorney General Bill Barr as he uses this weaponized projection.
Unfortunately, just in the past few years, we have seen these conflicts take on an entirely new character. Immediately after President Trump won election, opponents inaugurated what they called the resistance. And they rallied around an explicit strategy of using every tool and maneuver to sabotage the functioning of the executive branch and his administration. The fact of the matter is that in waging a scorched earth, no-holds-barred war of resistance against this administration, it is the left that is engaged in the systematic shredding of norms and undermining the rule of law.
It is the left that is engaging in the systematic shredding of rules and norms and the undermining of the rule of law? Seriously? I mean, there are countless objective examples that this is precisely what the Republican Party has been doing for the last 40 years. But that's not enough. They have to move into the next phase of this, which is projecting what they are doing onto us in a weaponized fashion, to the extent where, when I say weaponized, I mean they have whipped their believers up into a frenzy such that they are willing to go and into a civil war. They will die in the name of fighting this intransigence from this projected intransigence from the left. while this is precisely what they are doing. And the only thing I'm adding different to the conversation is, because I think we get this, it's the fact that this is intentional all the way down to the grandma on social media. They know that this is what they're doing. It is a game. It is a game to them that they are trying to win, and they have agreed upon a set of rules of not engaging in good faith, to try to force you to always engage in good faith, to mire you down, to bog you down in semantics. Because if they didn't expressly say that they were going to kill you, or even if they did expressly say that, then they say, oh, it was just a joke. But if you remotely hint at it with just loose language, then you are an example of the violence of the left. It is weaponized projection, and it is intentionally done over and over again. And I would just suggest that one of the techniques that we use to respond is to quickly identify when you're engaging with someone who's not engaging in good faith, and realize that and shut it down and move on, because we do not have time. And the other thing is, obviously the most important thing is for us to continuously organize. And if there was a solution to this, I don't know that there's a solution to this, except for finding a way. The Republican Party has to be destroyed, people. I'm sorry. They have to be burned down to the ground, and they need to be replaced with the establishment of the Democratic Party. Like Michael Bloomberg, he would be the very best Republican this country could offer. He's not a Democrat. And even if he was to win the Democratic nominee, they would tell you that he is a socialist trying to take over America. And they most certainly would start. Oh, the anti-Semitism that you heard in that previous clip would come out teeth and fangs. They would be so malicious and vicious with their anti-Semitism towards Michael Bloomberg, because it is a necessary tool for them to obtain power. That's all. They don't care about anything else but gaining power, and they will do anything they have to. They will weaponize anything they have to. They will weaponize their racism, and right now they're weaponizing the tool of projection. And we have to, honestly, the Democratic establishment has to go, because they are not equipped to fight against this. Hell, I don't even think they are aware of what's happening to them.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Well, all right. Hey, man, this music is that bounce for real. Okay. Special shout out to all of our newest patrons. Carlos C. Thank you, my dude, for becoming a patron this morning. And a special shout out to Rebecca Cadora. I think I pronounced that right. Thank you so much for becoming a patron yesterday. You too can become a part of this amazing family. We have a great time. We hang out on Discord. And whenever I come to a city, I'm looking for patrons to hang out with. You could join this family by going to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and becoming a part of the patron family. Now, like I told you, I'm on the road. I am currently recording in my other niece's bedrooms. I was in a different niece's bedroom yesterday, and so I'm only saying this because the interview with Malaika, which I'm very much looking forward to, was a great interview. The audio quality is not to my liking. I know I didn't have to, but I just had to say that. So we had to record at the last second via Zoom. And I'm grateful for the technology being there, but it certainly is not what we're used to. But that being said, Malaika is brilliant. Take a listen to this interview. Joining me now is Malaika Jabali. She is a writer, a journalist with The Guardian. She has bylines in Essence.com, The Intercept, Current Affairs, and she writes for The Marginalized. Malaika, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ben.
It's my pleasure. Last week, I saw you at the debates, the debate party that was hosted by the Georgia South Project. And we discussed shortly after bringing you onto the show, because I wanted to discuss the article that you wrote about the Democratic Party generally excluding Black people in general, but particularly issues from Atlanta specifically, considering they were in one of the largest cities for Black politics in the country. But something happened today. An article came out from the Politico discussing President Obama's plan to interject himself into the politics of 2019, of 2020, particularly if it became the case that Bernie Sanders looked like he was going to win. And I've read some of your work on Barack Obama. You have a really robust critique of Barack Obama. I wanted to get your take, your first take, and then we can dig in a little bit. What are your thoughts about that article?
Well, the comments apparently are alleged. They were stated by one of his advisors. So that's what the Politico is citing, one of his advisors that's making these remarks. But if it is true, it goes down a line of what Barack Obama has been saying since he began campaigning for the Democratic nominee in 2016, just kind of generally saying that, we can't abide to purity politics. So this idea of purity in our politics and kind of being measured and taking our time is something that is a drum that he's been beating for the past few years. So this would be consistent with that. But my piece in The Guardian, where I talk about his comments that he made at an Obama Foundation event last month, kind of was giving him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
My argument was that he does not recognize the political moment we're in because he made a lot of comparisons to kind of the civil rights movement of 1963.
Right.
And I was saying that he has, I think, a general idea about what justice should be, about how we can improve communities in the long run. And maybe he just has a very tempered response to what we need to do, when I believe that we're in a 1968 moment where, it wasn't that far after the civil rights movement. We had these nonviolent struggles, but a lot of people were just up in arms and in protest and radical protest. But I'm kind of wondering if this argument, if these comments are true, whether it's not that he doesn't recognize the moment, but that he does recognize it and he still wants to stall the movement. And the Politico is saying that this is something that could be a way for him to preserve his legacy, because more progressive politicians will kind of reject, the legacy that he's created since he left office. Yeah. And that just smacks of, complete selfishness, again, if this is true. And unfortunately, it would be extraordinarily disappointing if that is indeed the perspective that he's coming from.
Yeah, in the Political piece, there was a caveat at the very end saying that the spokesperson, Obama's spokesperson was asked about this directly, and he said that Obama would campaign for whoever the Democratic nominee is. The thing is that this is the second report in 2 weeks that had the same sentiment. This one was a little more direct. The Politico article from today was a little more direct in that it called out Bernie Sanders very specifically. The Huffington Post iteration of it really gave the sentiment that Barack Obama would go after Bernie Sanders. Last week, he was going to come after Medicare for All. This week, it's about Bernie Sanders. I have to agree with you. I think that if this is the case, if this is true, that he's fully aware of the time that we're in. He's fully aware of what's going on, but he has made a commitment almost like he did while he was in office. I think if we're going to be fair about this, we have to really look at his policies that he's implemented. He did not implement progressive policies. He implemented center of the road and sometimes right-wing policies. So it could just simply be the case that he's willing to risk it all to protect centrism and to protect the Democratic establishment, if this is true.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us have given him the benefit of the doubt and assumed that some of this was about a tactic and not necessarily about an ideology, that perhaps he just felt that this was a better strategy. So reaching across the aisle, essentially implementing a Republican health insurance plan, of course, because it came from Mitt Romney, who's governor of Massachusetts at the time, right. That these are all strategies because, you needed to be able to move something. And of course, in Congress, I work in legislative government, except it's not a bicameral legislature, it's unicameral. And so we tend to work with the mayor's administration a lot. And that requires some give and take. So I think a lot of us understand that process of having to, you literally have to negotiate legislation. So we understand the limits. But to then see this opportunity to forward, legislation that can really impact people's lives systemically, to be able to ride on this wave of worker strikes, of worker organizing. This is the most worker strikes that we've had in the past 40 years, where people are looking for really progressive legislation. You have Medicare for All, that's extraordinarily popular. The Green New Deal is extraordinarily popular. So really these ideas themselves have become centrist. They have become mainstream. Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have led multiple polls. And even when you talk to voters who would support Joe Biden, when you look at the issues that they actually support, like in the same polls, they'll choose the ones that are more progressive. But a lot of people just think that Joe Biden has a better chance of defeating Trump, the electability argument, which of course, we can argue back and forth what that even, how real that is. But when you look at people's issues, they align with these things. So then it does call into question, what is his actual ideology? If he's no longer in office, he does not have to negotiate for these things. People want this. What is your actual purpose?
Yeah. And I think this is a critical time where we can pull back the veneer. We can pull back the curtain and look at politicians who always told us that it was about processes, right? It was about protecting institutions. Most of the excuses I gave Obama while he was in office was that I accepted him as an institutionalist, that he was more concerned with protecting the institutions of our government than pushing any particular ideology. But I agree with you 100%. At this point, it can't be about processes or institutions, because Bernie Sanders is going through the democratic institution. Bernie Sanders is going through the proper processes, and the people are speaking. The masses are speaking. So I agree with you that this is, if this is as it's reported, and I want to make a caveat here, like, because spokespeople and aides, they do get besides themselves sometimes. And whether or not it was a conversation that Barack Obama actually had, it may not be a conversation that he was willing to actually act on. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure from this article. He's going to have to speak out about this, because I think what he's going to quickly realize is that there is a significant amount of pressure that we could put on him, even though he's not in office, if he's concerned about his legacy. Because this article really hit the ground. I mean, it hit the fan so loudly today that I don't think that he can ignore it without clarifying it. Why don't you speak to his concern about his legacy, but also the fact that do you think he has as much pull with the electorate as he thinks he has?
I don't. And this really is a redux of 2016, because he was making these same arguments in 2016. And so that was probably an even more, it felt like a more pressing situation. Mm-hmm. We're faced with a realistic run from Donald Trump. No one imagined that it could happen. He went on this same kind of purity politics tour. He spoke about Black Lives Matter. Sometime after some young organizers with BLM protested Hillary Clinton. Then he spoke again at a commencement address that same year. So this was the same year of the election. And even then, if you look at Black voter turnout all over the country, even in states where there weren't any, new voter ID laws that were impacting the Black vote, the vote was depressed. And, voter suppression, I told you I'm from Georgia. That's why I wanted to go back home and do that reporting on Atlanta. And I've been talking about voter suppression since I was in college. Like the first person I had the chance to vote for was Cynthia McKinney. And she experienced that first. Like we experienced our vote being suppressed for when we attempted to vote for her in the early 2000s. So this is like an issue that's near and dear to me. But I don't want us to get kind of lost within that and paint a broad brush and apply it to every single situation amongst every Black community everywhere. Because the vote was depressed, even in again, like I said, in cities where, you didn't have the same voter ID laws, but it also declined even more than it was in 2000 and 2004.
Right.
And in Milwaukee, where, Wisconsin does have a voter ID law that they enacted really about almost a decade ago, but it came into force in 2016. But Democrats had a really long time. They had about a 6-year period to engage voters on the ground, and the vote declined almost in half. And so that's the lowest drop they've had in history.
Wow.
So, some people say that, you don't have a Black president, you don't have like this historic presidency. So of course it's going to go down to normal levels, but in some places it didn't even go to normal levels. It went to unprecedented levels. And Wisconsin was one of them. And if you look at studies that, unfortunately there haven't been nearly enough, because when it comes to thinking about Black issues, we only think about it during election years and not on an ongoing basis.
Right.
But immediately after the election, the census put out their survey, and it showed that about 40% of Black people did not go to the polls because they felt that they disliked the candidates, or they didn't think that the candidates essentially would be working in their interest. So that's 40%, almost half of Black people who did not show up to the polls did so for those reasons. Then there was a University of Wisconsin-Madison study, specifically the Wisconsin voter ID law on votes, on voter suppression there. And they found that in the 2 most Democratic counties, which has the most, the largest Black populations, it was about the same breakdown. About 40% of people didn't go to the polls because they didn't like the candidates, or they said that they just did not feel that the candidates represented their issues. Things that represented voter suppression amounted to maybe about 5 to 7% for both of those studies. And so, we can't take any of this, for granted. We have to fight voter suppression wherever it exists, and also be aware that because it exists, we have to work doubly hard to actually engage Black people. And that is not what's been happening. And when you say things like, we can't go too far left, you're talking about issues that Black people care about. Like,
Absolutely.
We care about healthcare. We care about environmental justice. We care about bringing labor and having strong labor union laws. Like, these are issues that we care about.
One of the things that I'm trying to sound the alarm over is the fact that the Republican Party and Donald Trump, they are addressing issues for the Black community. Now, whether they're doing it genuinely or they're just giving us lip service, I believe they're giving us lip service, but they're putting it front and center, and they're putting money behind it. They're pouring money into Black conservative organizers. They're pouring money into Black conservative media. And when you pull up the fact, when you pointed out the fact that 40% of Black people didn't vote the last time, that really speaks to a problem that has been endemic to the Democratic Party for some time. It's not a new question of what has the Democratic Party actually done for the Black community. It's a question that they were able to skate by because, one, Obama made a lot of progressive promises, right? First and foremost, he seemed like he was going to be a really good progressive president. And then 2, he had the opportunity to become the first Black president. So I think it covered up a long-standing problem that the Democratic Party has. And as soon as Obama was out of the White House and Hillary Clinton stepped up, Black folks were like, I'm good. Because what has the Democratic Party done for Black people? Compound that with the ADOS movement and all these movements that have been here that are really pushing this narrative of self-disenfranchisement because of these issues. I think the Democratic Party is going to be really surprised in 2020 if they don't jump on this issue now. It's almost too late, but they have to jump on it now because there are a lot of Black people who are disillusioned with the Democratic Party. And I think someone like Bernie Sanders, somewhat Elizabeth Warren, but I think more strongly Bernie Sanders really represents an opportunity to bring issues to the front that Black people will go to the polls for. I said a lot there, but just pick any of it and kind of and give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think speaking to your your mention of, the types of issues that Black voters are interested in and who best represents that. What the progressive candidates, and we can argue about how progressive Elizabeth Warren is, but we'll just, for argument's sake, we'll just say
we'll wrap her in there.
Yeah, we'll say Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, because there is a wing of Black people who do believe that she represents their interests, but they are saying similar things,
right,
with those policies. That is what we're seeing, when you talk to even Black people who aren't disillusioned. So imagine the Black people who feel like the Democratic Party hasn't represented them. My reporting in Atlanta was talking to kind of a mix, Black people who are kind of vested in the system to the extent that they want to bring more Black people in the process. And then there's some Black people who divested altogether. But even amongst Black people who have invested in the system, you're having a really, you should do a little bit of soul searching if these are regular voters, Black women, who are the so-called backbone of the Democratic Party.
For sure.
And they're telling me things like that. And, through my reporting, they're telling me that the Democratic Party has not been addressing their issues. They're catering to the white middle class, not just through the candidates, but through the primary process itself, because, you're centering all these resources and all this activity on New Hampshire and Iowa, and that dictates what the conversation looks like. And if these are active voters, active Black, quote unquote, we mule for the Democratic Party, and they're telling you this, then something is a problem. I don't have any recent information on this, but Essence put out a study of Black women, and these aren't like radical, super progressive. It's not like a super like working class demographic with Essence, but even with them, I think Black women said that their faith in the Democratic Party was about, I think it was, I don't even want to give you the wrong numbers, but basically it declined by about 17% from 2016 to 2017. So within a year, the faith that Black women had in the Democratic Party declined. And this was after, you had kind of these centrist Democrats saying, blue no matter who, you have nothing to lose. I mean, you have everything to lose by not voting and coming out. And so that was the extent of the engagement, to kind of guilt trip people. But that clearly is not enough, even for the backbone of the Democratic Party. And one of the things that always bothers me is kind of our revisionist history, because people are saying, why are Black people just like divesting now? And, there's just too much at stake. But if you look at our voter turnout since since we passed the Civil Rights Act, the Black voter turnout has been on a steady decline up until Barack Obama's presidency. So even in 1996, people say, oh, Black people love Bill Clinton, and, we supported him, so why wouldn't they support Hillary Clinton? And that's sexist. But in 1996 was the lowest Black voter turnout ever.
Two important points that they don't realize or they don't want to acknowledge. Number one, Black folks are radical. We've had to be radical in this country. I mean, it's almost like in our DNA, for lack of a better phrase, how much radical politics play a role in the Black community, and how much Black people really do align with the progressive agenda, even if we're religiously conservative. I mean, I could talk with religious people at church, and they, at the same time, they'll be talking about Jesus, they'll be talking about socialism. So I think people don't realize that. But then the other thing is, I think they don't realize, or they don't want to accept, they being the establishment, is that Black folks, we don't vote for Democrats so much as we vote against Republicans, because of Republicans showing us their willingness to be open and blatant racist rather. And so I think it's almost a case of, okay, we'll give you our vote, but we're not really voting for you. We're voting against, if that happens in 2020, we'll be voting against Donald Trump. particularly if we don't get someone who represents the progressive side of the Black community. I know you have to wrap it up, so just give me your last thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear it.
Black people tend to be pragmatic. I've talked to folks who range the ideological spectrum, and whether they are more moderate or more radical, we have this tendency to say, okay, I actually know that this federal system, the presidential election process, is really not going to do a whole lot for Black people substantively. So then it becomes just kind of a matter of negotiating different levels of harm reduction, and just how much are you willing to kind of sacrifice, I guess, in terms of your principles to be able to reduce those harms. Like, are you okay with a warmonger as long as they're saying that they're going to invest more in Black communities that have, suffered from the criminal injustice system? Like, we continuously make these compromises, and being Black in America is a compromise. Like, I did not ask to be here. My ancestors did not ask to be here. So it's a compromise with me just living here. So there's only so much that I'm willing to do when it comes to the ballot box. And so that's where I stand on my principles, and how other people do it, that's up to them. And I don't think we can assume any sort of ideology by the way that Black people vote at all, because we all tend to think pragmatically when it comes to federal elections, and then recognize, okay, things are going to have to be done on a more local level, on a grassroots level, because we are a minority. That is like the consistent messaging that I hear, again, from people who are, even among people who are invested in the system, and they work actively to bring Black voters into the Democratic tent when it comes to the presidential primaries. What that means for us, I think we have to start engaging more with our own agenda, because for me, I think there are limits, even with the crop of candidates that we have right now who are progressive. We have to have our own agenda, because the things that intersect progressive politics or radical politics, which is what I align most with, things that intersect radical politics and socialism and specific race centric programs are not necessarily going to be discussed on any stage at the federal level. And so it's up to us to come up with our agenda and to fight on a local level and a state level to make sure that our voices are heard.
Absolutely. Malaika Jabali, writer for the Guardian.com, bylines with the Intercept, current affairs, Essence. I do have to mess with you real quick. You have something extremely controversial on your Twitter timeline. You said that the Popeye sandwich is not great.
Listen, I have thought about this ranking. I would probably, I'm a Georgia girl, so I would probably put Chick-fil-A first. And they just announced that they're not going to be supporting anti-LGBT organizations. So I feel safe saying that publicly. I will put Chick-fil-A, maybe tied with Zaxby's. I'm sure people don't know nothing about no Zaxby's and that Zaxby sauce. That's 1A and 1B. Shake Shack is even, I don't know.
There are a lot. Yeah. It's not controversial to me, because honestly, I tried it. I broke my diet to try it, and I was a little disappointed that I actually ate those carbs and those calories, because it was good, but it wasn't really all that. But you left off one.
All that. What?
You left off one. Bojangles chicken sandwich.
I wasn't done with my list. I didn't want to meander, but I would put their breakfast spicy sandwich above the Popeye sandwich that I had. Because they like that hot sauce is just like right under the breading, and that Bojangles biscuit. It's everything.
Look at you. You described that perfectly. That's exactly how it is. Let's tell everyone how to get up with you.
I'm most active on Twitter, Malaika Jabali. So MALAIKA JAB as a boy ALI. And that's also my website, malaikajabali.com.
Pretty YTT. Pretty YTT. Pretty YTT. Pretty YTT.
All right, folks, that's it for today. A pretty lengthy show. I want you to go to call in, actually. 857-600-0518, and leave me what you are grateful for, what you're thankful for politically, as we get ready to go into a Thanksgiving episode or whatever we're calling it on tomorrow. But thanks for hanging out with me. Anyway, you know where to go to support the show. Thank you to all the patrons. Thanks to Malaika Jabali for doing this last night on her vacation, as well as all of you who are listening. I will see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.